You should be reading books instead of burning them.
Nice.
Welcome back.
Nice.
Ty and that guy. I'm Wes Chatham. I missed you too, except that one guy on the chat box on YouTube. And we know who you are. We've been talking shit about you this whole whatever years. You're the bad guy. But you know what? Nobody reads your shit, okay? I got you blocked. Today is a very, very special day for me because you've gotten to hang out with Brett a lot without me. But I get to hang out with him here. He's one of my oldest friends from Hollywood, from LA, the making movies and magic, and we got to work together. So I'm excited to have him on. And I'm really excited because I know we're going to do a movie that is near and dear to his heart. And he is a huge fan of this movie. What movie are we doing?
Finally, we're doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh man, shit. I thought we were doing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I prepared wrong.
Oh, you know what? I can do that
you said
too. Let's go.
Wes said the best Indiana Jones, so I naturally, my mind went to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I really wanted to come on and just argue that Crystal Skull was the best and just see how long I could drag it out before I just collapsed. Yeah. And I realized it wouldn't be very long.
Well, in my opinion, we've already broke the rules because there's really, in my opinion, and then we can discuss this, I think there's 3 Indiana Jones movies, and I don't know what the others. I heard rumors that other things have came out since then, but I don't even want to acknowledge those. I don't even put those out there.
One of my favorite behind-the-scenes docs ever is for The Last Crusade, when they're talking about coming up with the idea for this movie. It's just the funniest ping-pong between George Lucas talking, like, I might as well just get into it now. But when George Lucas was like, I've always had this idea for a haunted castle movie. And then the edit just goes straight to Spielberg going like, we can't get George to stop thinking about this haunted castle movie. And then Harrison Ford, for the last time, like I told him, I don't want to do a haunted castle movie. And like, you just see poor George getting bullied in the edit. And then I thought maybe he has kind of a wise father. And then Harrison Ford, it just sounds like Yoda all over again. And then Spielberg like, well, I thought the dad was good. He's just getting punked in the edit the whole time, and it's so funny.
I think if the last couple decades have proved anything, it's that when George Lucas has an idea, he should be questioned. he should be interrogated. Should be.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the decades have proven that is true, and I'm glad that Steven Spielberg has the backbone to stand up to some of those terrible ideas.
For sure.
But I will say, since we're talking about Last Crusade, the way they pulled off the Jones father with
Sean Connery,
Ramirez from Highlander as Indiana Jones' father, that actually worked, and it was a really hard thing to pull off. And I remember coming out of the theater the first time I saw it with a friend of mine who's a big movie buff like us. We walked out, and he's like, I don't know if I like Sean Connery as the father, because Indiana Jones is such a tough guy, and Sean Connery's playing as such a bookish librarian kind of guy. And I'm like, that's the reason it works.
Yes.
If his dad is the same as him, if his dad's a tough action guy who like punches people and swings on ropes and stuff, it's going to seem ridiculous. The fact that Indiana comes out of a house where that was the upbringing, where it was very bookish and very studious and all of that, that's what makes it work. And I think old Sean Connery absolutely pulls that off.
100%.
And I think, we talk about fight consistency all the time. And one of the things that this movie does really well is the action is the expression of the character, right? The action comes from the character. And I remember I rewatched this recently for the podcast, and I was a bit nervous because I didn't remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. But Sean Connery works so well because he subverts that tough guy. He was 007. And so Sean Connery is masterful in his performance because he knows what he's doing. And I think there's so many, like, do you think Sylvester Stallone would have done this? Or do you think there's so many actors, like he is the picture of masculinity, right? And he goes in and he embraces this character, and he understands that he's not the hero within the movie, and the humor and all of that works because he's subverting the Sean Connery that we've grown to know, the 007. I mean, he gets slapped, he gets pushed around, he's bookish, he has his thing. He pulls out his umbrella, and the North by Northwest, and he's flocking the birds up into the plane. And it's and then they got us
moments.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, son, they got us. It's perfect. But we were Ty and I were talking about this in one of our previous conversations. How I get, and Wes, I know you and I have talked about this so many times, but I get so excited to see an actor that gets an opportunity to go extremely out of pocket. As far as like just out of their target zone and their the comfort zone, and like one of my favorites ever is seeing Bruce Willis in Death Becomes Her, just like doing something so far away from what we're used to, and he looks like he's having a great time doing it. And this is the other one. You're right. It's like, I thought this was my introduction to Sean Connery, because I didn't know he was the guy in Darby O'Gill and the Little People, because he looks so different. And so like when I saw Indiana Jones Last Crusade, this was my introduction. I didn't even know what James Bond was yet. I wasn't allowed to watch him. And so it was shocking to me to learn over time just how different this was for him, because he's brilliant in this movie and he's so funny. Like his comedic timing is unbelievable. I should say the casting is perfect, because Indiana Jones at this stage is already so iconic. The only way that you could cast a father and have a father story is to have a father that matches the iconography of Indiana Jones, right? And Sean Connery is one of the only actors I can even think of at a time period that could do that, who could show up and be just as exciting to see.
Yeah, the trick I think is, and what they pulled off with this movie is he has to believably be Indy's father, which means Indy's a big guy. He's got to be a big guy. So they get Sean Connery. Sean Connery's a big man. He's a large man, right? And so like you see them together, they look like they go together. They both have that same sort of physicality to them, but Indiana Jones is, he's swinging on whips with his torn open shirt to show his chest, and he's punching guys and he's shooting Nazis with machine guns. If you just do the same thing with the father, like I think that's the bad version of this. You do that.
Yeah.
The good version, the one they landed on, is have a guy who looks physically as intimidating as Indy and just isn't. He's just not that guy. He's a guy you see spending a lot of time in libraries. He's a guy you see spending a lot of time, like, there's an early scene where he's illuminating his notebook, and you hear him saying, may this illuminate me, as and like you hear this sort of bookish like reverence to him, like he comes across as a very religious man, very
a poet,
very studious man.
Yeah,
but
like
physically he's still a match for Indiana Jones.
Yes,
right? He's not like a tiny little nebbishy guy.
Well, yeah, because he didn't play the cartoon version of what that would be. He didn't play at being the bookish guy. What he is he's a man that happens to be focused and have these interests, but he's confident in those interests. And so when when the shit hits the fan and all the action, he's like, they're acting like they're trying to kill us, and he's like, that happens to me all the time, Dad. And because he's a professor who's never been in that situation before. Maybe if he had a different life, he could have become what Indiana Jones is, but he's not ashamed of it. He's not a lot of people that play the character, if they're not the action guy, they compensate or whatever, they're not ashamed of it. He's totally is who he is, and he puts Indy in his place when Indy, he slaps the shit out of Indy when he does something that's blasphemous, and he's like, know your place. And so he still has authority, and he still sleeps with the
she talks in her sleep.
He's still James Bond.
He's still James Bond. And that's
still James Bond.
That scene was great, because you look at Sean Connery and you're like,
amazing.
Of course the ladies want to sleep with him. Yeah. And it's like the first time where it's like Harrison Ford has somebody that's an equal to him in that area.
Yes.
And so when she's talking about how great it is, Sean Connery's like, well, yeah, and then you're like, oh my God, did he put it together?
She talks in her sleep. But what's interesting too is he's so, I love how he puts Indiana Jones in his place, right? Like we've had 2 movies now where we're like, all the boys growing up are like, I want to be Indiana Jones, man. I can't wait to see Indiana Jones. And then this movie is the movie where you see the guy that Indiana Jones is intimidated by. Actually, he fights Nazis, but he clams up in front of this guy.
And the dad, the Dr. Jones Sr. is not impressed by Indy's heroic antics.
Right.
He's not impressed by punching guys. He's not impressed by shooting guns. Those sorts of actiony bits do not impress him at all. He's impressed by knowledge. He's impressed by, the bookish side of things. So when
Yeah.
Indy's running around doing all this punching and looking at his dad like, "Hey, Dad, did you see I shot the machine gun?" And Jones Sr.'s just like rolling his
Seems
eyes, like, "Calm down, son. Let's get back to the books."
I
think
think you're proud of doing that.
That whole thing is what made me laugh the most, because Indiana Jones is kind of like, hey, you know, like, and his dad's just never responding to it. Even when he breaks into the castle to save him and he cracks him over the head with the vase, and then he's like, "Oh no," and he thinks he's concerned about him, but he doesn't.
Okay, Dad.
Yeah,
He's like, "Oh, it's a fake."
the construction of their relationship was so smart, and how they developed it within this movie. Now, I think that it's done at the highest level. I love this movie. I will say, and I wasn't going to get in this yet, I was going to get to the end. I will say that I prefer the Fortune and Glory Indy more than the Sun Indy. So this version of this movie works really well. The comedy works well, but for me, it does take a little bit away from that first Indy that I met in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where there's a bit of mystery about him. Like, where did this guy come from? And he's so focused on these things, but the motivation was not these things belong in a museum. He, you know, in Temple of Doom, the kid asked him why he does this, and he's like, "Fortune and glory, kid." And I think he means it. And there's a bit of an anti-hero quality. There's a bit of a darker quality, which he always ends up doing the right thing, but there's a darker quality to him that I was mesmerized with. And we lose a bit of that in this movie. And this movie is extremely well done, extremely creative. And so this is fantastic in how it does it and everything like that. But I want to know more about Indy. I don't necessarily need it to happen with Indy. And I think we can go to the sequence of the River Phoenix sequence, where Indiana Jones is such an important character to me, that kind of summing up, even though the sequence is exciting, it's fun, but summing up,
it's my least favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, summing up all of the parts.
It's my least favorite part of the movie.
What it does to me is it subverts Indiana Jones a little bit, and it makes it a bit cartoonish, and it's not as dangerous. Is not as dangerous as the other indies that I prefer.
Well, that sequence with the train and the circus and all that stuff is very cartoony, and it is, and having one single event define everything about him. Here's why he's afraid of snakes. Here's why he has a scar on his chin. That's silly. That's very silly, and I don't like that. But
like,
the
what's
thing
your
that
backstory? It all happened on a train one day.
It's all like, I have one backstory. I was on a train one time.
There's one day I was on a train.
The thing I do appreciate about it, and I think the thing that launches the Fortune and Glory Indy of, and maybe this is just my headcanon, of the Temple of Doom, is I like the version where he tries to get the thing back and he loses. And the scene at the end where the guy says, "You lost this one, kid," and gives him the hat. To me, in my head, that launches the Fortune and Glory Indy, because that's the thing that makes him a little bitter and a little jaded and sends him on that path for a while. I like the scene between the two of them, with the older fortune hunter who says, "You lost this one, kid."
That moment's really great. Yeah.
And if you just had him trying to get the cross from them, and then that scene, and you cut out all the cartoony running around on the train in between, I think that's a good sequence. It's just all the cartoony running around on the train that I think loses it. Like Wes is saying, having one single event define everything about a character is terrible storytelling.
I have such a complicated relationship with the train sequence, because when I first saw this movie, it came out in 89, so I was 7 years old. And like, the train sequence was my jam. I'm just like, yeah, kids can do this too. And then you kind of grow up and you revisit it and you're like, it's a little silly. Yeah. And now on the other side of the mountain of a few movies and directing, I watch the train sequence and I'm like, this sequence isn't necessary, because I agree with everything you're saying. But it is also an incredible technical feat. Like, this sequence looks so easily executed and is a nonstop nightmare. And the fact that this thing works at all is insane. But I do think they could have saved a lot of blood, sweat, and tears by just maybe skipping it and doing what you said. It's just kind of going to your point too, Wes. Like, it just feels like it's answering a question we're not asking. Like, I don't think anyone left the other movies kind of going like, I wonder what his childhood was like.
Yeah.
But
I think
introducing his dad at home is,
yeah. And I think
alluding
the
to
answer is not as interesting as me wondering what it is.
mm-hmm.
You know, and I think the mystery of it, and going back to Temple of Doom, I mean, he was dark in Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
And and even in Raiders, you know, what's interesting in Raiders is that it all got cut out of the script. But if you go back and watch Raiders, he has champagne on the table. And he was actually having a drink with one of his students, like a romantic drink that one of the girls that you see in the thing. And they ended up cutting all that out. But now that I know that I can't unsee that, and then there's something there's something about the flaws that Indy has. Like when he runs into Ravenwood, she was young. Like when they probably too young, maybe too young to be appropriate.
Definitely implied,
right? It's definitely implied, and and he is a worldly intelligent, so he definitely probably was taking advantage of something he probably shouldn't have been taken advantage of, and her rage against him is justified.
But if he was a college professor now, he would definitely get canceled.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's got a bit of scoundrel in him.
Right.
Yep.
So taking those things that those flaws, the little bit of that darkness that makes him so fascinating, and then make him, it belongs in a museum, and that's his main focus in the beginning, is just not as interesting to me. That I just prefer the other Indies.
Completely agreed. Like I do think this movie 100% still works if you just started it with him on the boat getting punched.
Right.
Even afterwards, it just wouldn't be as exciting, but it totally works. I do think what's interesting is, so I was reading the J.W. Rinsler behind the scenes book, on the trilogy. And what's fascinating is, I should preface by saying that I do like Temple of Doom. I don't hate Temple of Doom. I think Temple of Doom is full of some peak Indiana Jones moments.
I really like Temple of Doom.
It's so much fun. It's just, there are so many chunks in between the peak moments that kind of make you go like, like it's not perfect, but it's so fun. Like, I do like it a lot. And I think Raiders gets a ton of credit for showing up and being the movie for doing something that hadn't been done in a long time at an exceptional and exciting level. Like, Raiders is flawless. It's a perfect movie. What Last Crusade, I feel like, was really trying to redeem itself from Temple of Doom, and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg talk about that, how they were kind of trying to just disown Temple of Doom, which is probably why you feel, which I never thought about till we were talking about it today, but it's probably why you feel the opening of Last Crusade feels more tied to Raiders than it does to Temple. And I don't know if that's a subconscious thing or what on their part, but it does feel like it's connecting itself more to the through line of the Raiders Indy, not the Temple Indy. But they were in the back of their mind trying to disassociate from some of the Temple of Doom stuff to redeem themselves with Last Crusade, basically, which I think is fascinating.
But Brett, one thing I want to ask you, and I know we're going to go through these set pieces and action sequences, but working with you on Husk, I thought Husk was incredibly difficult to establish geography when you're doing like action scenes, something, because everything, like, running through corn, like, how do you keep where people are oriented and everything like that?
Right.
But I think one thing that Spielberg is genius at is, in an action scene, is geography, sense of space, and sense of keeping track of what everybody's doing. So even
100%.
I don't want to jump to this now, but like, if you think of the tank sequence, there's people on horses, there's different tanks, then there's different soldiers on the tanks. There's some people that are inside a tank, and Indy's doing this. And not for once, you know what everybody is and where everybody's doing, and not once you're guessing. How do you pull that off? I mean, is that all storyboarding? Is that, how do you? I mean,
I can't. I don't know what the heck Spielberg does. I know he storyboards like crazy, but it does take that. Like, you have to have, it has to be visualized, and you have to see it beforehand to know how to choreograph it and get everybody choreographed. But then there's also the stage of have this whole thing choreographed, watch the whole thing play out, and then you can see where you want to film it, in the moment as you're seeing it with your own eye, going, oh man, we need to get a camera here, we need a camera. there's so many different ways to do it, but that's what blows my mind about the tank sequences. This isn't just an action. This isn't like a warehouse fight. This isn't like Riggs and Murtaugh, it's like showing down at the strip club and Lethal Weapon, like this is a mobile sequence. Like this entire fight is happening on a moving tank. And the other thing that Spielberg does beautifully, not only does he establish the geography well for the audience, but he finds really clever ways of using the geography in the sequence. Like when Indy's hanging in between the wall of sand and the cannon is sticking out and it's just, and he's hanging there and you're like, oh my God, he's going to die. I'm going to ignore the fact that I have no idea how he got stuck on that cannon because
there's no way that strap gets on there, but who cares?
Every time I see it, I'm like,
but who cares?
Exactly. But who cares? But he uses the geography and the elements within the scene. Like it feels like he's live responding to what's actually there to continually evolve the sequence.
This is, I think, where being great at too many things means people forget how individually good you are at things. So Steven Spielberg has made making the biggest movies in America for 60 years, right?
Yeah.
And he's great at everything. I mean, he made E.T., he made Schindler's List, he made all these movies with emotion and heart at the core of them and did amazing work with them. And so because of that, we forget he's one of the best action directors in American history. Right? We give 100%. That credit to other guys. We go, James Cameron's the greatest action director. James Cameron is a great action director, but I think Steven Spielberg is as good or better than just about anybody else who's famous as an action director.
Yeah.
But he just does so many other things we forget. Like he's such a great filmmaker in every way that we forget that individually he's amazing at these narrow little niches of directing. And
exactly.
This is a movie that is like one of the greatest action directors in American history, just flexing at you the whole sequence. He's just flexing. He's going, look what I can do.
Exactly. That's what's okay. So still talking about the tank sequence too, because I remember Scorsese said that about Spielberg because they would all visit each other on set, and they're like their budding careers and stuff. And Scorsese said about Spielberg that he never had met anybody who could just show up on a set the way Spielberg could, watch everyone rehearse, and just identify exactly where the camera needed to go when, but also to innovate the moment. Like, hey, on this set, you're passing this table. That would actually be great to interact with. Or what if you grab this glass here and like just interacting with the environment more? And the tank sequence is an example of all of that. But the other thing that it does masterfully to me is the juggling of tone, because Indy fighting to get to his dad in the literal belly of a beast, right, is so suspenseful and action-packed and intense. But then there's such great light-hearted stuff happening, not comedy, but, it's just the tone of his father's story inside when Marcus Brody's coming down there to help him, and then they do like...
The father and Brody in the tank are comic beats.
Yes. And that totally work. Like, the scene is ping-ponging back and forth, but they're also still connected. Like, the fact that they go in there and then they accidentally knock the guy out who falls over on the thing, which now makes the tank start swerving. Yep. So they are constantly relating to each other and ping-ponging back and forth. And I'm just like, I that sequence still blows my mind. I used to, the chase sequence, the truck sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course, is an incredibly iconic action sequence.
Greatest of all time.
And I feel like Spielberg was going like, all right, like, how can we elevate here in Last Crusade? And that's actually where I think he did it, was the element of his dad and Brody and basically having someone on the inside within the conflict actually affecting party elements of it, but also the tonal shifts.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to the expression of the character, that is where they avoided a major landmine with Sean Connery in the tank. It wasn't like he all of a sudden became a hero in the tank.
Right.
He was kind of fumbling around, and he ends up taking out his pen and shooting ink into the other guy's eyes. And it's such something, and I can see.
And then he's so nerdy about it. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. It's like, you're such a dad.
Yes, he's such a dad. And I feel like I just want to give a lot of credit to Sean Connery because he really understood what was important and embraced it. And We've all worked with actors and we know how egos get involved. And it's so easy for them on that day to be like, wouldn't I just punch him? Like, couldn't I just get a...
what if I just punch this guy?
What if I did him? You know, and they would be like, he's kind of just throwing me around the tank and he's putting my head up against the thing. Like, can't I just do this thing? But Connery just leaned into it. And that's what's so genius and so funny about the...
I think Greg and I both know how awful actors are.
I do too.
None present, but no, you can... And that's the constant joy of the movie to me is I never stop feeling like Sean Connery is just leaning so hard into whatever Spielberg thinks is right for the movie and the role, right? Like he's having so much fun playing this character that is nothing like the characters he normally plays. But I mean, the end of the chain sequence, he thinks Indy's dead, which is such a massive turning point on their character journeys, right? Because this movie is all about this fractured relationship between father and son slowly healing. And he goes from like just all these great comedic bits and one-liners to, man, when he thinks Indy's dead, it's so moving to me.
I mean, they only let that hang for a second, but that second lands. That second lands when he actually thinks Indy is dead. There is a really sad moment, and then quickly Indy walks up behind him, and we get the great comedic scene.
But he does have a moment where he's like, "I never told him."
Lost you, boy.
Yeah, where he's like, I never told him, and he has the revelation that if Indy's dead, I never told him what he meant to. And then he comes up in the comedy of Indy going to looking over the cliff to see what they're looking
over the cliff, and he's nodding, he's nodding and panting. That was
quite all that guy took, huh? Yeah.
You know, and
but
one
that's
of the
what's funny is that's funny, and then Sean Connery spins around like almost crying when he sees him, and you're like, man, this is hitting all the notes.
And one of the things that Ty and I talked about a lot on this podcast is because I'm a child of the 80s, and my first experience of action heroes were Rambo or Commando or Predator or those guys where they're invincible. And I remember, going to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, the scene with the shaved German with the mustache and him getting punched and him falling to his butt and being like, God, like you can see how bad it hurt him. And it was the first time that I saw like vulnerability in an action hero. Yeah. And I loved it. And it was because it just makes it so much more fun. And then you realize like,
the fight at the airplane is a classic scene for exactly that reason, because Indy's been kicking ass this whole time. Then he runs into it. They say there's always one dude who's badder than you. Yeah. He runs into the dude who's badder than him, and that dude just kicks his ass. And Indy doesn't win by being tougher. He wins by being more clever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's such a great moment, and really, I think that is the sort of defining Indy thing that if he can punch you, he will. But if he can't punch you, he's going to find out something. He's going to figure something clever to do.
That's actually, like, you just touched on, I was going to say this earlier, it's the best thing about Indiana Jones across the entire franchise is, and I've only recently thought this watching back through the movies with my kids, he's just a master of responding and not giving up. He's not actually great at everything. He's, in some cases, never even tried it before, but he's just not afraid to try it now because he has to. And so the ingenuity of him to constantly find ways to jump. Oh, I didn't make it. So now I need to he's just constantly not dying.
and he's courageous. He doesn't hesitate. Even when they were in the castle and he had an idea of where his father was, he looks out the window and he says, okay, he lassos the thing with the rope, swings over to the other side, gets his feeding, and then swings through the window. Like I would have measured it out. I would have thought about it. I'd be like, maybe I could do, you know what I'm saying? He's just like, and by the time
my dad's lost forever.
By the time I made up my mind, we would have been caught. But his hesitation of those things. I will say that one action sequence I think does suffer, and I think it is particularly because of Spielberg. I think that Spielberg had such a hard time on Jaws that he just doesn't want to shoot in the open sea ever again. So on the Coronado, when we first meet adult Indy, it is so clearly a set. It feels like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland. Like, you know, when he
That's
falls in the
hilarious.
water, it's such a smaller scale of everything else because it's
really
like
true.
I could just see Spielberg, and he says that, like when they asked him to do Jaws 2, he's like, I am never shooting on the ocean
Yeah,
ever
I will
again.
not be doing that.
Yeah, I will not be doing that. So I do think that
is
sequence does
really
suffer.
true. Well, you know, it was always my favorite bit of tidbit of trivia with this too, is how they shot, like how the motorcycle sequence was added after the movie was done. And I remember as a kid in the 80s saying that was the first time I had ever heard of a movie doing that, where they finished the movie and they were like, this really missing something pace wise. And they shot it on the backwoods of Skywalker Ranch.
Oh,
So,
really? Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
so
yeah.
like it was basically after they're at the crossroads and like, which way are we going? Or before that whole motorcycle
It's
chase
before
after
that,
they
yeah.
escaped the castle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's just funny. I feel like the movie, I like the sequence, but I just think like, I wonder why they felt they needed it.
Well, because there would have been a long dead spot without it. And I think that's what pacing was. I think that's what Spielberg is reacting to, is there's going to be this really long dead spot here. I need something in there. Yeah.
He understands pacing so well.
Yeah.
You know, there is, so my kids, I watch this with my kids, and they're the canary in the coal mine for attention span. And and when they start tuning out, I always like try to pay attention why they start tuning out. And the exposition scene of the Holy Grail, when he goes and he meets the guy, and that's when they were like, you know, getting up and playing with their guns and jumping around and like, you know, doing, you really look at that scene, and the reality is they both know the story, and they're telling each other the story that they know. He goes, oh, I know this story. And then he continues telling the story. Well, if you know it and he knows it, why are you telling it? You know, what is the point?
Because the audience doesn't know it yet.
Because the audience doesn't know it.
You mean the this about the this from this time and this thing. And
But watching it now, that scene really does kind of slow things down and kind of, you know, it's the scene within itself. It's like you in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the two guys were there and he was writing on the chalkboard and explaining the Ark of the Covenant and its history and what it means. That was fascinating. You're learning something new because he's
exposition scenes ever written, I think.
And I think this is the inverse of that, because
I don't think the first time you watch it feels that way though. I think the first time you watch it, because there is this interesting emotional thing happening underneath it. You're talking about the scene on the blimp, right? When they're talking about okay.
The scene where the guy first tells him about the ark, about the Holy Grail.
Yeah. I know the one you're talking about.
He ends up and so he says, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story, and then he has a big exposition dump, and then he says,
where the bad guy is lecturing him about the thing,
and then he goes, I'm going to tell you another bedtime story, and as he starts the exposition dump, Indiana Jones goes, I know this one. And he finishes the dump for him. And it's like, if you know the story, why are you telling it? I mean, he's already told us one bedtime story. I mean, one bedtime story a scene. You know?
How rad would it have been if in the movie he goes, I know, and then just walks away.
And then just walks off.
Listen, leaves. I think the movie would be better off with it, because we end up learning all the details.
So a better version of that scene is the one I was thinking of, which is the one on the blimp, where Jones Sr. and Indy sit down at the table, and he's got the book and he's showing him, like, here's the clues that I've discovered. Here's how you get through the mountain pass. Here's the crescent moon thing. And it's such a great moment, because it is Indy looking at his dad and going, I'm sitting here, I'm having a scotch with my dad. And this moment is powerful to him. And Jones Sr. doesn't even see it, doesn't even acknowledge it. He's messing with his book and he's talking about all this stuff. And because of that, because there's that emotional thing happening underneath the scene, it doesn't feel like an exposition scene, even though it totally is. Mm-hmm. The problem with the scene you're really talking about is it's the bad guy lecturing the good guy about the story, and there's no emotional connection there. There's nothing happening
even
underneath
because we don't know the guy's a bad guy yet. So even if he was a bad guy, that would be some kind of conflict or some kind of dramatization. Right. These are two people that are friendly, that are telling people stories that they already know, and multiple stories. You told me one bedtime story. Don't tell me two bedtime, because he literally says, I got another bedtime story for you. But yeah, you're right. That's a really great scene between the two fathers, and it's to slow the pace down and connect you to that. But also, when Sean Connery goes through the diary at that point, I want to know what
you're hungry for that information.
I'm hungry for that information.
Yeah,
and it's mysterious.
Well, you also, like, the narrative expert of the Holy Grail is now present in the story and able to have a conversation, right? Like, because it's really the first moment of pause where they can really talk. It's so, yeah, like, I'd listen to him talk for however long he wants to talk about it, because I'm like, that's why we've been chasing him this whole time. And as opposed to a character we have no connection to. Right.
And then the thematic information within that scene. So in the beginning, when Indiana Jones says, I'm interested in facts. If you're interested in truth, the philosophy office is down this way. And he's almost rebelling against, because his father believes in certain higher truths and certain things that are connected to these facts. His father
definitely comes across as a religious man.
Man. And so what Indiana Jones, and the kind of cynical nature of the previous two Indies that we've seen, is like, he's not a believer in these things. He believes in facts. And his father is obviously a believer in this. And so when he's telling him this thing, Indy's recognizing the belief that his father had in this and what he saw as a kid, which ultimately he felt like that this was more important to his father. And that's, whatever happened to mom, because he brings up mom in that situation. But that's the divide between them when they do the...
It is, what I love about it is, as essentially Indy is on the hunt for a treasure at the center of what he probably holds as his biggest childhood trigger, as far as the fracture with his dad. But that actually brings me to my favorite thing. Two things I love about this movie a lot, but my biggest thing is Spielberg said this movie was about more than the other two, because Raiders was about recreating the magic of their childhood, and they did it in spades. Temple of Doom was about doing it again, and they weren't so sure if they did or not. But he said this movie, like, we had to call it The Last Crusade. We didn't want to call it The Holy Grail, because it was never what he was after. This is a movie about Indy finding his dad. Like, the treasure of the film that he walks away with in the end is a healed relationship with his father that's been broken. And it was reflecting, I feel like it's why there's so much, impactful storytelling, is because it was reflecting his desire to heal his own relationship with his own dad,
Yeah.
And it's so amazing, because when you finally build to the end of the movie, when he's reaching for the grail and, his dad's just like, let it go, and he lifts him up.
He calls him Indiana.
I'm just like, yeah. I'm just like, God, like, I don't know what else to do with myself except love this movie. I'm just moved by it every time. But it's kind of like going back to like what you were saying, Ty, was it's giving us all of the ingredients of the chase and the hunt and stuff, but it's rooting so much in something emotional that isn't necessarily the case in Raiders, but we didn't need it in Raiders. Yep. In Temple of Doom, it was just being dark and trying to be a different type of movie. This movie hits me on an emotional core so much more than those other two do, but I don't think they need to. This movie just wins for getting to.
A critic I read way back when this movie first came out, and I can't remember who it was, said that, the romance in the first movie is Indy reconnecting with Marion, and the romance in the third movie is Indy reconnecting with his father.
So good.
Yeah.
And that is what it is.
Yeah. And what I love is all the way up to that first scene when River Phoenix runs in and he doesn't hear him, he doesn't see him, he says count in Latin. So his work was more important, and him calling Indy Jr. and Indy saying, don't call me Junior, call me my name, is basically, you're not seeing me. You don't see me. We don't have a relationship. And at the end, when he's reaching for the grail, and you're right, Brett, him saying, Indiana, let it go, calling him by his name for the first time, Indy realizes that this is the relationship that he's been seeking all the while, with all these.
And he's seeing him. Like, here he is. His dad is seeing him, grabbing him, saving his life. It's just so good. So then by the time
I do kind of feel bad for the old knight that they just let get.
I mean, that's
I don't
another
feel
thing.
bad.
The hanging from the tank doesn't always make sense to me, and I forgive it. And the old knight. Like,
Listen,
was he really here this whole time?
I think that night is like, it's been 700 years. I am
He's
so
ready
bored.
to go.
I am so
He's
bored.
ready to go.
And he takes a half-ass swing with the sword, and he's like, "Whatever, fucking, I'm done."
Yeah.
Like, you know,
He should have just gone, it's that one.
It's that one, and please walk past the steel so they would collapse on me. I've been doing it.
And he's like walking out to the Faith Bridge, and all of a sudden this old man just peeks out because we know he can. We saw him show up in the other movie, and he's just like, "Hey, it's an illusion. Like, just step out. You don't got to worry about it. Just hurry over here." You know, it's funny watching this movie. I have a funny experience with this because we grew up. I don't know if you guys grew up going to the drive-in, but I went to the drive-in so much as a kid. Like, so many of the movies in the 80s, I saw the drive-in. And the theater we went to had 2 screens. So, you know, it's like the projector was always in the middle of the parking lot, so the screens faced each other, but the cars were facing the screens, so you didn't know. And I was so mad because we went to go see, I can't even tell you the movie we went to go see because I wanted to see Last Crusade, but my parents had decided, because I was 7, they were like, we want to see it first to make sure that it's not too scary for you. And I was like, I can handle it. I'm 7. I'm a man. And they wouldn't let me do it. And so I
Did you have that mustache at 7?
Yeah, I did.
I picture young Brett with that mustache.
It was Sharpie, though. It was Sharpie. I was like, I'm a man, okay, Mom? But what's so funny about it is I was so defiant because I wanted to watch it so bad. I went into the trunk of the car so that I could watch Last Crusade. And I just pretended to be watching the movie whatever it was. But when we pulled in and I looked back, the scene that I saw with no context or anything was the scene with, can't remember the bad guy's name. But,
when he drank the cup, the wrong cup? You choose
the bad guy drinking the cup.
Walter Donovan.
There it is, Walter Donovan. So when he grabs the Holy Grail and he drinks it and then shrivels up into a corpse and it's terrifying, I didn't know that scene was coming. I couldn't hear the music that was maybe building the suspense. I didn't even know who this man was. And so I'm just looking out the back of the car going, oh, I wonder who that guy is. Oh, he's drinking out of that old cup. And then I saw the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen in my life. Oh my God. And so I had to climb into the backseat of the car, you know, and watch our actual movie, traumatized. Like, it's why I still remember. I'm sitting there like, they were right. I can't tell them, but they were right. It's so scary. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Do you guys want to go through the last sequence of the Grail before he gets to the Grail? One of the things that I think that I really enjoy about this is that, you know, he says facts and truth, and the reality is like they're both right. There's almost like a higher power within the things, but then it's not really, because it's booby traps. You know, it's like Saul's coming, but you have to have a deeper understanding of the knowledge of what's happening, right? There's nothing really supernatural within these booby traps, but they feel like supernatural in the booby traps.
Well, I will say this. It was actually my friend that I went and saw this movie with the first time who said this when we came out, and I've been stealing it ever since. Like, our level of being able to build shit has gone dramatically downhill in the last 1,000 years. Because we can't build a watch that doesn't break down after a couple of years. And these guys were building spinning blade traps that lasted for like 1,000 or 2,000 years.
For sure.
That like still fucking work. And they're made out of like bamboo and shit. So clearly their level of building technology was so much more advanced than ours. Because that spinning blade trap, it still works.
After all this time.
And I want to know whose job it was to go put the letters back in the letter puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when people fell through and died, did somebody go put was the knight out there like putting new letters in where people fell through?
The knight coming out there just like, well, it's all part of the gig. You know, the king tells me it can't anymore.
I do have a few nitpick about those letters, but it doesn't, this is just fun to talk about. It doesn't affect the movie was like, I love the scene. I love how he falls through, but when he falls through the thing, what is he holding on to? Because those are all wrong letters that he pulls himself up with. And then I'm like, what is reinforcing the right letters? Because they're all, I mean, maybe they're just like real stone and the other ones are like breakaway stone. You know,
this is my other logic headache. The strap on the cannon and the letters, because every time I'll even pause it and I'll just be like, I just want to understand the engineering of this.
You don't get to. They were better at engineering stuff than we are. Yeah. They were just better.
Like,
So tell me if you guys think I'm right about this. And this is the first time I watched it, and I was like, so ever since I watched it when I was a kid, I always thought the bridge was made out of the same rock that the cliffs were. So when you look at it, it just blends in with the side of the wall, so you can't really. It looks like there's no bridge there. But then when I watched it this time, I was like, it almost looked like it was invisible. So was it? What was it? Do you guys know?
It is painted to look like the opposite wall.
It's a painted
That is
illusion.
definitely what they're.
Oh, so it is
That's
painted.
definitely-
Oh,
it's an
I thought it was
optical
the
illusion. Yeah.
actual rock of the.
No,
wall.
it's when the camera moves sideways and you get the sideways view, it looks like it's painted to look like the opposite wall.
Yeah.
That's
And that's the
interesting.
knight's other job is keeping the paint fresh.
He's got to go
because
paint,
as soon as it
and he's got to
fades,
sweep
like,
because
the
if
illusion's
dust
ruined.
gets on there, it destroys the illusion.
That's
So
why
like the knight, I want to see the short film of just the knight's daily chores. He goes out with a broom and he sweeps off the invisible bridge.
We'll call it.
And then he goes
I
over and he
chose
puts
poorly.
oil. He puts oil on all the gears for the like spinny blade trap. Make sure that's all oiled up and stuff. Make sure that's all wound up. And then he goes and he like replaces the fallen letters for people who fell through the letter
And then he
trap.
shuffles the grail options just to change it up a little bit.
He
like,
moves
oh,
it
this
around
is
a little
really gonna
bit,
trick
and then
him
he has
this
to take
time.
another sip from the real grail so he doesn't fall over dead. You know,
Right.
That's
True.
that would be a funny short. And the reality is like he's got to be so bored. And I want to know how many times he's taken.
he's just jerking off. He's over the corner jerking off. There's nothing to do.
I mean, he clearly doesn't step outside. He's white as a ghost without
Well, he
being a
can't
ghost.
pass the seal.
I
He can't go
wonder.
past the great seal.
I wonder if sometimes he takes like the false grails and is like, all I need is one sip, and this is all over.
I could just take one
This is
sip,
all
and
over.
it would be over.
It would be over. Why did I
700
vow to
years
do
of
this? Yeah.
I'm
You know,
out.
why did I? Why?
Or
What was I
turn
thinking?
on the
So-
blade trap, and you just stand there. Come get me.
because
That's so funny.
because the reality is too is he's an old man, which means he hasn't been sipping on that out of the good grail, so he's letting himself get old,
Right.
Because he's like, look, if they come in, I'm no match for them. You know, they're gonna kill me like that, and then I won't have committed suicide. You know, because he gives such a half effort, like
he's wearing
swing
that
of the
heavy ass
sword.
chainmail the whole time.
Yeah, that swing is
Chainmail's
nothing.
really heavy.
Yeah.
He's
Where
wearing
does-
that shit the
I
whole
know.
time.
Does he
But maybe
shower
that's
in
what
that
he
little
does.
bird bath thing where you dip the grails in there? Like, where does he
don't
shower?
That
think
seems
he
a
showers.
little blasphemous.
Yeah,
Don't think
it
he
does
showers.
seem
Oh,
like-
but that's funny for our little short film. Cut to he's there. He's like washing his pits in the grail bath thing. He's like scrubbing up.
and also I can see him like, you know, like bouncing a tennis ball off the wall, and then he hears in, he's like, oh, and then he gets down and starts like doing like he's praying, like doing the
Like he's praying.
doing what he's supposed to
It was
do
like-
at the book.
Years before, he was getting so bored, he thought he could like pull off a trick, and he like takes off the chainmail and walks out the door and comes back in like, I'm totally not the knight here to discover the grail, and like I just defeated that last guy out there. Wonder which one it is.
See, that's
Voice
a
of
funny
God,
short
I
film.
know-
We should
I
make
know
that
it's
short
you.
film.
Yeah, we should make that. That'd be hilarious.
I was going to say the last thing about this movie that I love, other than the father-son story and the dad being Indy's treasure, there's a great like bit of behind-the-scenes stuff that you guys have probably heard it, but it doesn't even pop up on the IMDb, which is so crazy. But Spielberg hired Tom Stoppard to write Indy and Sean Connery's relationship, and he came in and he did a complete pass of just their relationship, their arc, and their dialogue, and then he did another pass of their dialogue later. But he really was the architect of how to make their relationship work. And it goes, I mean, you see it because they have some really brilliant lines. Like even just the line you guys already quoted, like I believe it was milkshakes. It's like just the poetry and just some of their simple exchanges.
My favorite exchange between the two of them, because it feels the most real. And it shows you why Sean Connery feels totally justified in his upbringing of Indy, is where Indy is saying, you know, you taught me that I was less important than these 8-year-old on dusty books. And Jones Sr. goes, did I ever tell you to brush your teeth, go to bed, finish your homework? No. I treated you like an adult and I taught you self-reliance.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
in his mind, he's a great dad.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Indiana Jones is proof that he taught him self-reliance. Look what a badass he is. He raised him to be that. So he's right. And his justification for that is so well done.
Yeah.
It's so good. I totally agree. You're right. Like without that, Indy wouldn't be who he is.
Yep.
But then at the same time, he obviously doesn't see anything that he has caused Indy in his.
I mean, Wes and I have had this conversation. I mean, my upbringing, I'm not afraid of anybody. And the reason I'm not afraid of anybody is all the fear got burned out of me fairly early on by my terrible upbringing. I'm not grateful for that. Right? Like exactly. I recognize that as an adult, not being afraid of people is a superpower. It's very useful because I'm almost never afraid in any situation. I recognize that is a superpower, but I also recognize that little kids shouldn't have to go through the shit you have to go through to get that superpower. So you're not grateful for it. Right. So I understand Indy on that level. He's going, yes, I'm glad that I'm self-reliant. I'm glad that I can count to 100 in Latin. All these amazing things you taught me are useful to me, but I kind of would have liked to have had a dad.
Right.
Yeah. It's like at least the pain can become useful. At least it can be turned into a power and not a injury.
Because I had that revelation. I remember because I was raised like that. Like my dad could have gave that speech. Did I ever tell you to brush your teeth or go to bed or go to school or any of that? Like I had complete freedom growing up. And I do remember like being in situations like I remember going to the military, going to college and being around other people and being like, you were still a child. Like you've never used a washer machine.
Yeah.
You've never. And so I've always had to, figure it out. I've always had to like and so that was, I never had a transition. Like me moving out of the house was not a transition. Like I just switched roommates. It wasn't like there wasn't anything different in that thing. And so, I do appreciate the speech that Connery gave because that is what I admire so much about Indy. When you see like there's something, he's kind of a loner when you first see him. He's not. He's kind of on his own. He's kind of alone, and he is rebelling against his dad. His dad is poetic. His dad is philosophical. His dad has faith, and he is cynical. He is a facts-driven person. He's fortune and glory kid, and those opposites are that alchemy within the movie is so interesting to watch, and then them come to really appreciate each other for who they are at the end.
It's like the evolution of the buddy comedy, right? Where it's like we don't just have two opposites. Like this isn't just Riggs and Murtaugh. This is a generational gap, and they are now bound by blood. Like the whole father-son dynamic of it, as well as being polar opposites from each other. Yeah, the alchemy of their relationship is. I just never get tired of it. I also think like. Talking about our dads, how it's fascinating that Indy is a grown man with his older father. And I don't know how it was for you guys, but there's so much of my own life that I didn't realize the things that were traumas or abnormalities until I became an adult. Like you go through life and then you go like, oh, wait, that is really weird for a parent to be doing. Or to be okay with, or you guys weren't treated this way, or you guys didn't go through this. And now as an adult, it's kind of shaped this perspective you have of your parents that you couldn't have as a kid because you hadn't lived enough life. And so now it's just fascinating because that's what my journey was. And Indy feels like he's really suited to deal with his dad now on this level. Like, I don't know how much he was even aware of it as a kid.
Yeah. Having kids, man, that really awakens you to like deep traumas, where I'm like, oh wow, I thought I was a healthy, well-adjusted adult, but it's like, no, there's some deep issues. I don't want to tell
my kids to brush their teeth. That's how my dad did it. I don't want to tell them that.
And then they got corn growing out of their gums.
I'm teaching them self-reliance, okay? Yeah. Like I was taught that.
I looked at that whole thing and went, I'll fuck this up. I'm not doing it. Yeah. I'm very much a believer in knowing your limitations. Well, I'm not scared of people, but I'm not going to pick a fight with The Rock.
Yeah,
I know my limitations.
Right, smart.
I'm looking forward to. I think we're ranking our favorite Indiana Jones movies in a row, right, Joseph? Is that what we're doing? And
Haven't we already done that? I thought we already did that.
Oh, did we?
I don't think we did. And Brett definitely wanted to come on to make an argument for Last Crusade, saying that it is the best. But we'll see how that goes.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Let's
and the patrons have weighed in as well.
I feel like there will be some conflict.
I mean, my ranking is very straightforward. It's very straightforward, and it probably is going to match the ranking of most people, which is number 1, obviously. Number 3 is the second best. Number 2 is the third best. Number 5 is the fourth best.
Oh, we're including those?
Way at the back. Way at the back.
I mean, I know they're only
top
rumored,
5. There's 5 of them.
but
good point.
I second that.
I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is the worst Indiana Jones movie by a wide
my
margin.
gosh, like it is. It has so much promise for the first few minutes, and then it just, phew.
And I think I knew very quickly that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was terrible, and so I just kind of was like, this is a train wreck. I was
sad.
I think, slightly more disappointed by Dial of Destiny, because there was this moment there I'm like, wow, are they making a good Indiana Jones? Is this a good one? Like, I was really kind of pulled into it. And even at the end, looking back, going, there was a good movie in there. There was about 100 minutes of good movie.
There's a lot more.
Unfortunately, it's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of not good jammed in with that good movie. But the feel of it and the look of it, and there was a whole lot of stuff where I'm like, this feels like there's a good Indiana Jones movie in it.
It had a, I always equate it to, because Dial of Destiny felt like it had the energy and the vibe of an indie film, just not quite the story, but it was close.
Yeah, but it was close.
Whereas Kingdom of the Crystal Skull felt like the ABC family reunion, like Friday night movie, or just like, hey guys, guess who's back?
It felt like the Star Wars Christmas special of Indiana Jones movies.
Yes.
I recognize that that's R2-D2. I recognize that that's
Christmas
Chewbacca.
special.
Yeah, but I don't recognize anything else that's happening here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why any of these things are happening.
If you watched Raiders, and you skipped Temple of Doom, and you skipped Last Crusade, and you went straight to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, when Marion comes out of that tent and she just goes, Indy, I mean, you would be like,
what is happening right now?
It's making me sad even talking about it right now. I just wish, though, it's like Prometheus, it's like, just don't exist. Just don't exist.
Yeah, you just don't.
It's like, I'm an ostrich, and if I stick my head in a hole, it'll just go away.
Do we have consensus that that's the worst one?
I agree with that.
Oh,
myself.
Consensus,
But
yes,
go ahead,
that's
Wes.
the worst one.
That's the worst one. Okay.
You guys are in consensus on the list, so you outvote me. But I will say that I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie of all time. So it's obviously going to be my first.
It's obviously number one.
It's obviously number one.
And it's one of the few perfect movies.
Yeah, it's obviously number one.
Yeah.
I think Crusade is the better movie of Temple of Doom, but I like the Indiana Jones better in Temple of Doom. And there's moments in Temple of Doom that, for me, and also combined with the nostalgia of me going to see it with my dad in the theater as a kid and the experience of it. So for me, and I know it's terrible in so many ways, and I wish it wasn't. So I discount that.
So you would flip 2 and 3?
Yeah, I would flip 2 and 3, because if I was going to sit down and watch one right now, I would watch Temple of Doom every time, because I like that Indy. And I like when Indy gets possessed and starts like ripping hearts out of chests and stuff like that. Like, I just thought that.
Indy never pulls any hearts out.
I know, but he's ready to it. If he doesn't get burned out of it, he's ready to do it. I thought that was so that's so cool.
There was when we were worried about Wes.
So I don't even want to talk about the other ones, but though mine is in order: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade. And I'm saying that knowing that The Last Crusade is a better movie. It is a better made movie. And there's also a character arc that is stronger than any of the other character arcs. But I love the dark Indy. I like a bit of the anti-hero within him. And also I like the mystery.
I just wish they had given something Kate Capshaw to do.
I just wish the story was about a little bit more in Temple of Doom, but it's only because The Last Crusade was my introduction to Indy, and the movie felt like it was about so much.
I think Kate Capshaw is ill-served by story.
For sure. I do love that opening dance number. I think
I do too.
So cool. That. But I conversely, like, which is the last thing I'll say about Last Crusade, but I rank Raiders first for the reasons that I know it's a better movie. I think it's the perfect film. My personal ranking for myself would have been Last Crusade. I like Last Crusade better personally.
Wow.
But I don't think it's a better movie. It just accomplishes
that's like what Wes was saying with Temple of Doom.
Exactly.
He doesn't think it's a better movie. He just thinks it's the one he likes more.
Yeah. I don't think Last Crusade is a better movie. I just like it more.
So
I think Raiders is by far the superior.
Wait, you put
the series,
The Last Crusade above Raiders?
No, I don't.
Oh,
okay. Raiders. I'm putting Raiders first because I recognize. I'm trying to say the same thing you said, but I can't repeat all of your words so well. But same for me. What you said, play it back, but with Raiders and Last Crusade.
But I just love Indiana Jones, man. Like, I just love him as a character, and I just like hanging out with him.
All right. Should we wrap this up?
Let's wrap it up,
Wes,
guys.
you got to do dinners and things.
Oh, wait. We have the patron ranking as well.
Right.
Which, Ty, you will like.
Did I crush it?
Their ranking. Yes, it was exactly like you said.
That's because my opinions are correct.
Ty's opinion just goes straight in the Journal of Facts and Truth.
Yes. Yeah. Whenever I have an opinion, it becomes part of our...
Ty has spoken.
I did see, I don't know if it was a Gen Z take on it, but it is interesting, just kind of like how Ty really did not like Return of the Jedi. Wes, your first experience with Indy was Temple. Brett, it was Last Crusade. I am more Ty. I saw Raiders in the theater. What I thought was the abomination ranking of Indiana Jones was where some Gen Z or millennials ranked Skull #1.
No, stop.
No.
Dial of Destiny.
No,
Last
nobody's ever done that.
Temple of Doom, and the last was Raiders because they just it was so dark and like, and I was just like,
are we allowed to reject memberships? Are we allowed to kick them out of the patron? All right. Thank you guys for hanging out. We love you. Please like and subscribe. Say goodbye, Ty.
Please remember to comment in the comments how much better Brett is than Wes. Make sure Wes knows. Let him know. Let him know how you really feel.
But that's like telling me the sky is blue. Like, it's just a waste of time. All right. We're lucky to have Brett on this podcast, and I'm so excited for it. So it doesn't need to be a competition, right, Brett?
You guys.
We can do this together.
It is not a competition.
I'm insecure.
Goodbye,
Listen, that mustache makes me insecure that Ty is pitting us against each other. That's Ty's routine, is to pit us against these. Let's don't play into it.
I know. So I'm a little scared of US, but I know that you stand no chance against a man with a mustache like that.
Listen,
I know you wouldn't last 2 seconds in that fight.
I only have a mustache because I will never have a beard like Wes's. So this is the best that I got. So I'm a partial. But hey, thank you guys for having me. Just love being on here with you guys. That was a lot of fun.
All right, cool.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.